So a couple of months ago, you and we spent some time counting every single book on my shelf. And I found out that I have 400 plus unread books. And I did make it clear that a goal for me this year was to be a little bit more intentional about the books that I'm buying and to focus on reading the books that I already have. And that is all true. However, I am still a book fiend at heart. And I have been adding to my collection. January is always the month that I end up buying the most books in by far. I think because it's favorite season and everybody's making their videos about their favorite books of the year and everyone's so hyped about all of the books, I just get really excited and I tend to be a little trigger happy with purchasing a few too many books. So yes, this is a haul video. We're gonna be chatting about all of the books that I've bought so far in 2024. Now, to be clear, about a third of these I bought secondhand, and the rest of them, the ones that are new, I either got on sale or the majority of them I bought through work. I'm a children's bookseller, which means that I can order in any books that I want and I get a very heavy staff discount. Some of these were also books that I pre-ordered or ordered in, later in 2023, and they just happened to come in early this year. So if you're not into haul videos, I totally understand. Feel free to skip this video, come back next week. But for those of you who want to check out the books that I've been buying, the things that I'm interested in reading in the near future, let's take a look. The other thing is I'm not going to include any of the books that I've read and spoken about so far this year already. Also, we have another video coming up next week that I'm going to be reading and talking about a bunch of books that booktubers made me buy. So I haven't included those in this video either. But that is more than enough of a preamble. Let's get to the haul. Let's talk first about the books that I managed to get secondhand, because secondhand book shopping has been working for me recently. The first one that I managed to find secondhand is this lovely hardcover copy of The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. Now, you might remember that last year Sea of Tranquility was one of my favorite books of the year, and everyone has said that I need to read this and Station 11, which Blair bought me for Christmas. I don't know a lot about this book or Station 11, to be perfectly honest, and I want to keep it that way. I want to go in pretty fresh. What I do know is that they're kind of linked to Sea of Tranquility. Not necessarily part of a series, but there are maybe recurring characters or connections. So I'm looking forward to discovering what those might be, and also just being back into the writing and the worlds of Emily St. John Mandel, because Sea of Tranquility was so good that I was left just wanting to read everything she's ever written. And now I have a couple of her books to be getting on with. I recently had possibly the best Savers book haul I've ever had, in one day. I found a handful of books that I've been interested in but probably wouldn't have purchased full price myself. And then I also found some books that were actively on my wish list. So one of the books that I don't know that I would have purchased myself, at least anytime soon, was A Memory Called Empire by Katey Flowers. This is a sci-fi book, and I think it's a duology, or at least there's two books out at the moment. I've heard really good things, so I have been kind of vaguely interested, and I'd always had this in the back of my mind as something I might look into once I'd read a few of the other books on my shelf. But when you find a book that you're kind of interested in for $3 from Savers, there's almost no better way to try it. I mean, maybe the library, but my library didn't have this. I've heard this described as political sci-fi, and that it's quite action-packed and thrilling. So I am interested in the political part. The thrilling, action-packed is probably the thing that made me maybe less interested in it, why it was kind of a fence book for me. But yeah, if I find something secondhand for a total bargain, I'm more than likely going to take that as an opportunity to give it a try. Now, a book that I thought was on my wish list because it looks exactly the same, but it's actually a different book by the same author. I was so excited when I found it. That is All the Seas of the World by Guy Gavriel Kay. The book I thought it was, and it looks almost identical. I realize now that it is a different animal, and obviously it's a different title. The book that's been on my wish list is A Brightness Long Ago, and I have since read, when I brought this home and realized my mistake, I have since read from a few reviews on GoodReads that you probably should read that before you read this. Even though they are technically standalones, I think they exist in the same world. Basically though, the reason that I was interested in that book was because it came up a few times when I was looking for historical fantasy. So this is an author I want to try, and so I might just kind of read the first chapter or two and see how I go. And if it seems like something I might really like, then I might go and get that book first and then come back to this one. I've heard this author described as being quite unique in terms of the way that he approaches fantasy or fantastical elements, and in fact on the back it's described as his signature quarter turn to the fantastic. And this book in particular is set near or around the Renaissance period. While this is not the book that I thought it was, I'm still happy to have found especially this nice big trade paperback that does not look like it's been read. If you have any strong opinions about which book of his I should start with, can I start with this one? Please let me know in the comments below. Another book that I have been curious about was Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. Now, this is obviously a pretty beat up old copy, but I don't mind. It still feels good, and I feel like that's the most important thing. This is a political fantasy with, from what I understand, some very explicit and intentional sexual themes as well. It's an older book. It was first published, I think, in the late 90s or the early 2000s, but it's kind of hung around as a bit of a cult classic. And I've always been like a little bit intrigued, but especially after hearing Bethany talk about reading this for the first time, I just knew that I wanted to at least give it a go at some point. I'm honestly not sure how I'm going to respond to this because people tend to have very extreme polarizing experiences, which is why I'm extra glad that I managed to find it secondhand. Another book I've been seeing around which people either end up loving or hating is Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. And this is another one I managed to find secondhand, hardcover. Now, from what I understand, this book, like Mrs. Death is the main character, and we're getting to know her as somebody is like transcribing her stories and her life, Death's life. Mrs. Death has had enough. She's exhausted from spending eternity doing her job, and now she seeks someone to unburden her conscience to. I've heard it's quite unusual, and yeah, it seems like people either end up loving it or just like not getting it. So again, in those cases, in my opinion, secondhand book is absolutely the way to go when you can. Now, these next two are actually proofs that I bought secondhand. The first one is Bunny, which is absolutely a book that I keep hearing about, and I have been just like low-key curious, but I don't think I ever would have picked up of my own volition for full price or even my discount at work. Whereas for a couple of bucks, I'm willing to give it a go. I don't really know an awful lot about this book other than that everybody says that it's just really weird. I think it's a bit culty too, so definitely a book I wouldn't have picked up had I not found it secondhand, because I have a feeling I'm probably not gonna like it. I've just been so curious, so it is nice to be able to scratch that itch without spending a huge amount of money. And finally, the last secondhand book that I picked up, I didn't actually realize it was a proof until I got home. It's Victory City, because like this is the cover that's for sale in Australia. I only realized it was a proof because I saw like the publication date here on the spine, which like you don't get on normal books, and yeah, down on the back it says that it was a proof. This is actually a book that I have kind of had my eye on the last few weeks. I think after reading Clara and the Sun, I've just been kind of keeping my eye out for like literary fantasy, literary sci-fi. And again, this is one I don't know a huge amount about, but it's intrigued me, and given my kind of renewed interest in more literary takes on genre fiction. So to find it for $4, even if it is a proof, like I'm pretty happy about that. I've never read anything by this author before, so I honestly don't know what to expect. I have heard some people say that this isn't really fantasy, but I got it for $4, so I'm willing to give it a go. Okay, now let's talk about the books that I bought brand new. Again, mostly at work, so mostly with my staff discount. 3 of these books I actually did order in 2023. They just took a little while to come in. So the first one is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. This one I've been seeing WOC Reader recommend quite a lot lately. This is an historical fantasy. I think it's kind of like an alternative reality sort of story. The Conductors is a wildly inventive alternate history that combines compelling characters, a propulsive plot, and lots of intrigue. It is also radical as hell. And Deanna Raybourn has actually blurbed this. She says, a wholly originally and thoroughly riveting story. And actually, speaking of Deanna Raybourn, I also finally got a copy of A Curious Beginning. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell mysteries. From what I understand, this is a fun, rompy mystery story, and it does have like a slow burn romance throughout the series. This is the book, I don't know if you remember when I was counting my books on my bookshelf and I mentioned that I did have another mystery book that I had already ordered. This is the one. This is the book that I was talking about. And even though I have been struggling to find mystery that I really love, I have high hopes. The other book that I ordered late last year and it finally came in is My First and Only Love. Isn't this cover so cute? And this is a love story set in Palestine around the time of the beginning of the Nakba in 1948. Nadal is the main character and she was a child in 1948 and her family had to flee. And then I think a couple of decades later she might return and she ends up falling in love with a freedom fighter. It says on the back, filled with emotional urgency and political immediacy, the author spins an epic tale reaching from the final days of the British Mandate to today with clear-eyed realism and great imagination. And here we've got somebody comparing the author to Virginia Woolf, saying that she is the Virginia Woolf of Palestinian literature. So I'm just really looking forward to this one. I wonder how high I'll get my stack before it topples over. Now these next 2 books I actually picked up when I was out on like a little book shopping day with my friend Nick. He came over to my side of town and I took him around to a couple of my local bookshops. It was lovely, the perfect day. One book I noticed on the shelf just because I liked the cover so much, I'd never heard of it before, it's called Crooked Plough. I mean, I love these colors. I love the illustration style, but on the flap here it says the most important Brazilian novel of the century so far. This bestseller's unique blend of magical and social realism has won at 3 literary awards and global acclaim. So magical realism and social realism are like kind of buzzwords for me. I'm interested already, but also I don't know if you remember, but last year I didn't really read very many books at all from South America. And seeing as this is heralded as a masterpiece, I thought that this could be one of my hopefully more than a handful South American reads this year. Then another book I picked up is How High We Go in the Dark. This is a book that, I mean, I've been hearing things about for a couple of years now. It came out in 2022, and ever since I can remember, people have been comparing it sometimes favorably, sometimes not so much, to A Sea of Tranquility. And obviously I love that book, and several of you have been telling me to pick this up. So it was at a bookshop on my little day out with my friend. So I did. I bought it. So thank you for that recommendation. I'm very much looking forward to it. Then another book that I have been recommended by a couple of you over the last few months is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. I managed to get this copy on sale from a bookshop recently because the dust jacket was torn. I'm not super precious with my books. I mean, obviously it would be better if it weren't torn, but if I get a discount, I'm not too mad about it. Now, clearly I'm not somebody who, I don't know, like scours reviews to figure out what each and every book is all about before I buy them. I go largely off vibes, I'm not gonna lie. And this is one of those books that I really don't know an awful lot about. But what I have heard is just that it's like complex and intricate, but really beautiful and beautifully written. I think this is another book that might kind of fall into that literary sci-fi camp, or maybe it's just straight up sci-fi. This extraordinary science fiction epic, which delves deeper into the perils of failing to learn from one's mistakes, is perfect for fans of big ideas and intimate reflections. I do like both of those things, so I'm looking forward to this. And obviously, I mean, I have people that I like to watch, and like I always appreciate their insight on books, but especially when people are in my comments recommending me books directly, especially when they say you liked this book so I think you'll like this book, or like it's obviously like a personal recommendation, not just a book that they liked so they want me to read it. A couple of you have been saying that you think I like this book, and I think I will too. I'm looking forward to it. I think it was Angela from Literature Science Alliance though, that I don't know if it was this book or another book by this author. She's mentioned they're a little bit dense. They're a bit of work to get through, but that they're worth it. So that's nice to know. I'll keep that in mind. I don't think this is gonna, no, it's not gonna stay. No. Oh, no. Okay, it's too late. Speaking of literary sci-fi, like I said, I think that one probably falls more on the end of sci-fi. This one I think is more on the lit fic. I picked up recently The Moon Represents My Heart, and this is by a Thai author, and it's about time travel, but more than that, it's about family and love and relationships, but we have a time travel kind of mechanism throughout the plot. Now, I did see on GoodReads that this book does have some pretty mixed reviews, but I like read a little bit of one page and I really liked the writing. And I mean, historically, I've been a sucker for like kind of intergenerational family saga kind of books. And at the moment, I'm very much seeking out literary sci-fi, and it sort of feels like this book might potentially be the best of both worlds for me. Obviously, I haven't read it yet, so I don't know, but like I couldn't pass it up. I have to give it a try at the very least. And actually, while I was having a flip through, it does seem like it's quite playful with format. Like sometimes it's just straight up, you know, kind of traditional prose, but then it splits up every now and then and is more like poetry or verse, and it kind of swaps between the two like within chapters. So I don't know, I'm intrigued by this one. Then a book that I had been interested in like a couple of years ago when everybody was talking about it, but I just never got around to picking it up, was The Deep by Rivers Solomon. And for some reason we just got this in at work at like the grown-up store next door, and I think seeing it on the shelf at work, like I just got quite excited, because even though this book has been kind of like on my list in my head for quite a while, I've never got to the point of like deciding to order it in. And obviously, since it's a new release, we don't just stock it all the time. So I don't know why, but we had a copy in. So I just decided to pick it up. So I heard incredible things at the time of its publication. And even though I'm a little bit removed from that, I'm looking forward to just diving into this with pretty fresh eyes. Now, a book I bought solely based on the recommendation of my friend, Sonia Solomon. I think I've probably bought more books on Sonia's recommendation than almost anyone else. Thank you so much, Sonia. This is Everything for Everyone, an oral history of the New York Commune 2052 to 2072. And from what I can understand, this is kind of like a near future speculative story about the collapse of capitalism and progressive responses to it. And I think it's told as kind of like a historic retrospective of this particular time, 2052 to 2072. And it's presented as a collection of interviews with the people who were involved in the revolution and the commune that was created. So I'm just really looking forward to this. I think it sounds like a really fun perspective and format, like a book from our perspective being about the future, but it's written as if it's a history reflection essentially. And on the front here we have a quote that says, "A love letter to abolitionist possibilities." I don't really know what to expect to like find in this book, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think at the very, very least, this is going to be interesting. Now we're down to our last two books. This one I picked up because if you remember in my 2024 goals kind of setup video, I mentioned that I do want to learn a little bit more about West Papua. Now I already have a non-fiction book that I want to read this year that I mentioned in that video, but I also not long after that discovered a fiction book. And I think I read somewhere online, so like I don't know for sure, so don't quote me, but I think this might be the first or one of the few books by West Papuan authors that have been translated into English. It's called Harvesting the Storm by John Waromi, and it's translated by Sarita Newson. And it's described as a fable from the shores of West Papua, and it's about their relationship with nature told through the friendship of 4 underwater creatures. And it's talking on the back about the landscape and the environment being disrupted, and essentially asking the question, can the Umbai people, who the author is like a member of, stay true to their local wisdom and traditional beliefs in the face of destructive and divisive influences and protect the balance of nature? So yeah, when I saw this on the shelf and I realized it was by a West Papuan author, and like that's one of my goals for the year is to learn a little bit more about West Papua, I knew I had to pick this one up. And then finally, a book that I've just picked up because of the hype is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. This is one of the many Japanese translated like books with cats on the front that I have on my shelf now, some of which I've read, some of which I still have yet to read. But I think the idea of this one is that basically there's a librarian who recommends books that people actually need to read. Tokyo's most enigmatic librarian is able to sense exactly what each visitor to her library is searching for and provide just the book recommendation to help them find it. So I don't know, it's almost giving Before the Coffee Gets Cold kind of vibes, where I think we're going to meet different characters and watch them interact with this librarian and learn about who they are and what they're searching for and why. And it just sounds kind of lovely. I couldn't help myself. So what's that, 17 or 18 books? And then I have also bought a few non-fiction. I won't talk you through every one, but there they are, just in case you're interested. And like I said, there are also a handful of other books that I haven't included in here because I'm intending to read in a video that you'll be seeing in the next week or two. So yes, that is a lot of books for the first couple of months of the year, but the beginning of the year is always the worst for me. So I am going to continue trying to focus on my own TBR, but I mean, I love buying new books and exploring new books and new stories as well, and I'm really excited about all of these. But anyway, that's enough. Let me know if you think there's any books that we spoke about today that I need to prioritize reading, any that you're particularly interested in seeing me read and maybe hearing my thoughts on. A big thank you as always goes to my patrons over on Patreon, and especially big thank you to Livia, Lynette Brown, and Marie. And thank you for watching. I will talk to you again in the comments and very soon in another video. Until then, happy reading. Bye!